With remote workshops, structure is extremely important. I would argue structure is important even with in-person workshops, but sometimes, when you're in a room together with a whiteboard, you can kind of like stumble your way through and still come out with something interesting at the other end. With a remote workshop, unless you have a strong structure, it can just be very disengaging for participants. So here's an example of how I might structure a workshop. Let's assume that a product leader came to me and asked me to get the team together and that we need to create a strawman roadmap for Q1, right? And so the thing I might do is send out an agenda like this to the team in a calendar invite. I might say, hey, well, we're going to do 2 days. Day 1 is going to be retrospective and problem framing. Day 2 is going to be ideation and prioritization. On the back end, though, I create my agenda. And my agenda is really thinking through every 10 minutes, what are we going to be doing as a team? What am I going to be asking people to do? And what are we going to be taking away? So it's really, really structured. For instance, for the Q4 retrospective, which was 2 hours, I might break that down to, I need to assign homework with certain topics for people to reflect on or gather data on and bring to the meeting. And then there may be readouts where we go around 5 minutes each, time boxed, play Oscar style music at the end of 5 minutes to make sure people move on. And then we might do an activity where individually we've listened to everything and we write down what we should start doing, stop doing, continue doing. Very typical retrospective activity. And then we might come back and create an affinity to see what the themes are in terms of start, stop, and continue. And then we might have another discussion where each individual reflects on 1 or 2 things that really resonated with them from the readouts. And then we might have a dot voting or some kind of voting activity to go from like a ton of retrospective notes to 2 or 3 things that we should start, stop, and continue doing. And then I might have a note here for myself to say, hey, I'm going to ask the decider, who is like an identified person at the beginning of the workshop, I'm going to ask the decider to write the final conclusion in terms of what are we really going to change next. So as you can see, like my agenda is extremely detailed, and this helps me make sure like that things are moving along. Once I create an agenda, I usually translate that into a Miro board using templates, activity guides. Perhaps I may have like a little, Mad Lib style template for people to fill out. This is a bullseye sort of prioritization framework that I might want to be using, any data that I want them to refer to. So this is really a visual agenda for teams to know what we're going to do for the next day or 2.